American Musical Theater, an informal workshop in a series of television biographies of people whose personal contribution to the musical theater has made it a native American art. With Irwin Kostal and the CBS Orchestra. With guest Stephen Sondheim. And singers Martha Wright and Ralph Curtis. With students from the New York City high schools. And today's guest for the workshop, Earl Wrightson.
Well, welcome, workshoppers. Well, no one can predict the future of the theater, the American musical theater. One thing is very certain. Talented men such as our guest today are going to be making very important changes from time to time. Now, he's a newcomer to the Broadway stage. He's only had 2 shows. Only Gypsy, only West Side Story, a talent of the very first magnitude. Obviously, the lyricist of these 2 great shows, Mr. Stephen Sondheim. Well, I won't have time to ask him all those questions now. Isn't that wonderful? Let's get to things real fast because we have so much to talk about. Everything's coming up roses from Gypsy. Gypsy, we were talking about earlier, is a perfect example, is it not, of the integrated musical where the words and the story and the songs flow in and out of each other?
In my opinion, it's near perfect, but...
Well, for instance, let's take some of the songs. Everything coming up roses. Explain about this to us.
Well, this is the song at the end of the first act when Rose, a very ambitious lady who wants very much to get her daughters on, or one daughter anyway, on the stage, suddenly is confronted with a disaster. Her daughter has left her and has eloped because she doesn't want to be managed by her mother. And so Rose is left with her world crashing down around her, and in order to point up the irony and the drama of the scene, we wrote a very up song, a very happy song, a jubilant form of hallelujah kind of song. And while she sings this, what's going on behind her with her lover and her daughter, who look horrified at this woman being brooked by nothing, the effect is, we hope, equivalent to a horror movie. There's something rather like the snake and the rabbit in this scene when she sings this song.
And the song Some People also is very definitely established her character, did it not?
That's the first song that Rose, the mother, sings, and it's a very ugly, bitter, angry song because Rose is a rather bitter and angry woman. And it's a very shocking song and is supposed to prepare you for the fact that this woman is not a nice lady and you're not expected to think that she's a nice lady.
Well, with Small World, it's sort of the same thing. Everybody thinks of this as a ballad, but this was not really the intent, was it?
No, Small World is a con song. She sees a man who's attracted to her, and she's not necessarily attracted to him. He's nice and all that, but he is an agent, and she needs an agent very badly. So suddenly, she starts to find things that they have in common in an attempt to entice him into her fold, and indeed, by the end of the song, he's caught.
We have a very distinguished member of our workshop here to sing for us, Small World, the star of Sound of Music, Miss Martha Wright.
Honey, you're a stranger who's come here, come from another town. Funny, I'm a stranger myself here. Small world, isn't it? Funny, you're a man who goes traveling rather than settling down. Funny, 'cause I'd love to go traveling. Small world, isn't it? a man who likes children. That's an important sign. Lucky I'm a woman with children. Small world, isn't it? Funny, isn't it? Small and funny and fine.
Won't hear it sung any better than that, will you?
No.
Isn't that wonderful? Tell me something. I noticed he listens to people singing his words. Gee, just so much do. But you told me you didn't like to write lyrics. Is that true?
Oh, well, no, I don't very much. It's a job that I find so difficult and takes so long that it's hardly worth the result, because very few lyrics, I think, come out well. I'm speaking particularly of my own, but I think it's true of most. There are so few words in a lyric that each 3 or 4 words is the equivalent of a scene in a play or a chapter in a novel. And unless every word is right, it stands out like a sore thumb and becomes much bigger than you had intended it. And it's very hard, because of the limitations of the language and the restrictions of what music does to words, to come out with a lyric that is consistently good from beginning to end. Just the maintaining of a specific quality is, I find, almost impossible and therefore very frustrating. And I know that of the lyrics I've written, very few really please me, not because I'm hypercritical, but because they're full of good things and bad things. And the result is so frustrating that I really
And you
I'm
are
not fond of it.
hypercritical.
Well,
I think another reason, too, of course, is that about your not liking to write lyrics or finding it such hard work. Mr. Sondheim's training was all musical. Let's get where you were born first and then get into your training.
I was born in New York.
There you go. And, well, tell us a little bit about the musical training.
Oh, well, I majored in music at college and got a prize to study composition in New York, which I did with a Princeton professor I studied privately, a man named Milton Babbitt, who, in case any of you may have heard of him, composes exclusively 12-tone music. He didn't teach me 12-tone or atonal music. He taught me tonal music. But he is also a fan of shows and show business, and therefore, though we only worked on serious music, so to speak, that is non-theatrical, nevertheless we had a rapport between us. And I got into lyric writing by a fortunate circumstance. When I was in my teens, I became friendly with the Hammerstein family, Oscar Hammerstein's family. And it was he who interested me in the theater and sort of pushed me gently towards writing for the theater and writing lyrics. And he also was a very hypercritical man. And right up until he died last year, I used to show all my work to him, and we would argue it. When I was in my teens, I hardly argued at all, because, but as I grew older, I got more and more persnickety about my own ideas, and we ended up usually not yelling at each other, but at an impasse, which was always a stimulation, because he was a marvelous teacher. And I feel really that I've been luckier than most, because there is no such thing as learning lyric writing except from a man like that.
Did he have any real helps, though, any specific advice regarding the thing at all? Or did it just rub off on you?
No, it all came from very specific things, mostly on one afternoon when I presented him with a show I had written for high school, and I asked him to judge it as if he would judge a professional show, because I was so sure it was so wonderful. And his reply was very brief. He said, well, in that case, it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And he then went through the show, word by word, all the songs, all the dialogue, to show me where everything was terrible. And I picked up from that afternoon a couple of principles, which I'm perfectly happy to pass on.
Please do.
Such as that a song should be like a play. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It should have an idea, state the idea, and then build the idea and develop it, and finish. and at the end you should be at a place different from where you began. And he also advised me that to learn I should try adapting a play on my own, first a good play, then a bad play, then a non-play like a book, and then finally an original, and I did.
Well, you're quite a ways from where you were before now, up with West Side Story, and we have a question here from Jane.
Mr. Sondheim, how did you get the job of writing the lyrics for West Side Story without any previous Broadway experience?
Well, I had written a show called Saturday Night, for which I did the music and lyrics. This was to be produced by a man named Lem Ayres, who died before we got into production. And armed with this score, I used to play for various producers around Broadway, and I finally ended up playing for Arthur Lawrence, who was going to write the book of West Side Story. And he liked it enough to bring it to the attention of Leonard Bernstein, and from there on, things fell into place, and we went to work on the show.
Well, now we get to some of the lyrics from the show. I know all the songs have a reason. Could you briefly set up Maria for us, for instance?
Oh, well, Maria is the song sung by Tony, the equivalent of Romeo in the show, after he meets Maria, the equivalent of Juliet. And it's merely that he's fascinated with the name. He hardly knows her. He's only met her for 2 seconds. And the whole thing has a very mystical quality, the meeting. Therefore, what this song is instead of being about the girl, it's about the name and how beautiful he thinks the name is.
And here is Ralph Curtis, a wonderful voice, to sing for us Maria.
Maria, I've just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me. Maria, I've just kissed a girl named Maria, and suddenly I found how wonderful a sound can be. Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria. And it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria. The most beautiful sound I ever heard.
The movie Alexander the Great? Alexander the Great, the movie, Ralph sang the theme song for that in the picture. Just wonderful. Now tell us about the next song that Martha's going to do for us, the set for I Feel Pretty.
Oh, this is the song sung by Maria when she is waiting for Tony to come and pick her up for a date. She's feeling very good, and she sings this song to express it. What she doesn't know, but what the audience knows, is that Tony is in a lot of trouble having killed her brother, and therefore, though she is feeling very gay, the song is essentially ironic.
I feel pretty, and isn't she, Martha?
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and bright. pretty face, such a pretty dress, such a pretty smile, such a pretty me. I feel stunning and entrancing, feel like running and dancing for joy, for I'm loved by a pretty, wonderful. See the pretty girl in that mirror there. Who can that attractive girl be? Such a pretty face, such a pretty dress, such a pretty smile, such a pretty me. I feel stunning and entrancing, feel like running and dancing for joy, for I'm loved by a pretty,
Well, now we come to Tonight. Would you like to set that up for us? Martha and Ralph are going to sing it for us.
3 words, the balcony scene.
Ah, the balcony scene, Tonight.
Tonight, tonight, won't be just any night. Tonight there will be no morning star. Tonight, tonight, I'll see my love tonight, and for us stars will stop where they are.
Today the minutes seem like hours, the hours go so slowly, and still the sky is light. Oh, moon,
Grow bright
and make this endless day, endless night.
Good night, good night. Sleep well, and when you dream,
Dream of me.
They're not going to get much rest because they are coming back with one hand and one heart, and that's the cue for you to set that up, Mr. Sondheim.
Well, this came from a very peculiar circumstance, which was that since we were making an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, we had the equivalent of Friar Lawrence as a druggist. Well, Friar Lawrence has one particular function in the original, which is to marry Romeo and Juliet, and the druggist could not marry Romeo and Juliet. Therefore, we hit upon the scheme of having them marry themselves, and they do indeed figuratively marry themselves in the bridal shop in the first act. And this song, One Hand, One Heart, is what they sing as a sort of hymn to accompany their own wedding.
Martha, Ralph?
Make of our hands one hand. Make of our hearts one heart. Make of our
Martha Wright and Ralph Curtis. Just wonderful. Now I have something kind of personal to ask you.
Shoot.
Do you get unhappy about things you do? I mean, things that everybody else comes to theater and loves. Do you have things that really bug you about it?
Well, if you're referring to this specific group of songs, many, many things. It would take a couple of hours. But, well, for example, I Feel Pretty, which sounds fine in a television studio, on stage is sung by a girl who, throughout the rest of the play, speaks in very simple language. So I don't know what she's doing using words like charming and alarming and witty. I didn't discover this, however, till too late to make any changes. That is, it was when we were out of town that it suddenly struck me how wrong this song was. And I wrote it out of a sense of frustration because I'd been writing so many songs using monosyllables that I wanted to show that I, too, could rhyme. So suddenly I got embroiled in this, and it was another songwriter who pointed out to me that it was slightly inapropos. Well, with Tonight, I don't think that Tonight is quite large enough for a balcony scene. At least it seems that way to me now. The original version of Tonight was much longer, but among the creative people connected with the show and the producers, Hal Prince and Bobby Griffith, and Jerry Robbins, who directed it, and Arthur Lawrence and Lenny Bernstein and myself, there was a great deal of disagreement on how long or seemingly long that song was. The result was that it was cut partially, and I think in the cutting it was made slightly ineffective. The scene works well on the stage, mostly I think because of the lighting and the sense of magic that's created. And that isn't so much a dissatisfaction with the song as it stands, but the song as it should have functioned in the show. And I think that is the sort of thing that
This is the man who earlier in the show said he was not overly critical, I think. Tell me, you said also you thought lyric writing was a craft and not an art. Is that so?
Well, by that I'm making a distinction between the kind of restrictions that are put on lyric writing as opposed to the fewer restrictions that are in most other forms of creative work, such as novel writing and painting and composing of music. Lyrics are a very restricted form. There is just so much you can do in each given set of circumstances.
Oh, we have another guest with us today, our guest conductor today, Mr. Irwin Kostal, who is the arranger and orchestrator for West Side Story. And we're going to call him over and hear some about his side of all this. How are you? Mr. Irwin Kostal. Did you encounter any particular problems in the orchestration department of this, or arrangement?
Well, when you do a Broadway show, you usually don't have time to have too many problems. For instance, we start immediately into action. The entire orchestral arrangements of West Side Story was done in about 3 weeks, preceding the
That's a
opening
record
of town.
time, isn't
Well,
it?
it's not the usual thing with Broadway
really?
shows.
Uh-huh.
It really has to be done pretty fast.
Well, tell me, why does a composer like Leonard Bernstein come to an arranger?
I think I already said it, because
Yeah,
it's got to be done
because it
pretty
has to-
fast.
I see.
In other words, he also has so many other duties in connection with the Broadway show that he couldn't possibly do both. So he's got to call in people to help him.
I see. Well, I know that our workshoppers have questions. I'll tell you what, I'm going to let them, Vic, I know, has one. I'm going to join the students and let you conduct the master class, all
Well,
right?
thank you. I hope I can do some good.
Vic, what was your question?
Yes, Mr. Kostal,
Yes.
what is the difference between an arranger and an orchestrator?
Well, it refers specifically to what you find on the music. When a composer composes a piece of music, we hope that it's a complete piece of music, and that when a man like Mr. Bernstein does it, it is. So all you do, you discuss with him what he would like to hear, flutes, violins, etc., and you follow exactly what is written on the paper. This is what I call orchestration. Now, I get to do very little of that kind of work, let me tell you, because today the composers don't bother with too much detail. They have, they specialize in, and I hope you don't do it on your next show, Steve. I know you don't, because Steve is the sort of man I think that we need. He's, as he told you, he's studying music. And believe me, that is a rarity on Broadway, because most of the composers don't. It goes back to a long period of time, and I'm answering your question. At one time in history, the composers actually did their own orchestration. They had the time in those days. Things were more leisurely, but also they could do it. For instance, Victor Herbert was a tremendous orchestrator. On one television show I did recently, I actually used Mr. Herbert's scores as he wrote them in 1916. I couldn't do them any better. He knew what he was doing. Kurt Weill was the last one to do this. George Gershwin never did it on Broadway, but he, after he became a successful songwriter, studied music and learned how to orchestrate. And by the time he did Porgy and Bess, of course, he was able to do a very good job on the orchestrations. Now, in arranging, you see, and the reason I tied in with the composer on this, if the composer does not do his job properly, the orchestrator has to come in and finish the job for him. Now, you'll be surprised how many times I do Broadway shows, and I hope none of those people are listening, where I get roughly a one-line melody, a lead sheet. And I have to add the bass, the harmony, the chords, and if it goes on for 4 minutes or routine, I have to think of things for the flutes to play and the violins to play, etc. And it becomes a rather healthy job. And I really feel like I am the composer's partner when I do this.
Well, you
Unfortunately, he doesn't think so usually, because you know the more you do of this sort of work, the less the composer likes it, because he's kind of mad at you because he didn't do it himself. I think anyway. And it serves him right. He should do it himself. I'm 100% for him. I think he should go to school and learn. We have too many lead sheet writers. Sure, the melody's important. The melody is the most important thing in orchestration. And I'm sorry, in music, not in even in orchestration it's important. The melody is the most important thing in music. But too many of our composers have decided to write only the melody. They have separated melody from music. Now, the art of melody writing is not a separate art from music. It's a part of music. I think so. And when they have written this top line and leave the rest to me, they've got to be dissatisfied because they didn't write it themselves. Right. Let them get down to their business and go to school and learn how to write.
Now, we have another question here from Judy.
Mr. Kostel, who decides about instrumentation, the arranger or the composer?
This is usually done at a meeting between the composer, the conductor, possibly, I think on West Side, Steve was there too, where I think you were. We sit down at a table with usually the composer's there, the conductor, and the orchestrator, and we talk about it. We decide what type of music we need, and quite often we decide to stick pretty well within the routine of the regular orchestra, that is strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussion. But this is decided by meeting.
Josie, I think it is.
Mr. Kostel, what advice would you give someone interested in composing?
Well, I think I've already answered a good part of that question, haven't I? See, I'm sure, like, I know that I meet a lot of people who want to write music. My milkman has tunes, and the Iceman, if he were around, he has them, and the cab drivers write a lot of music. And my next-door neighbors, in fact, we're songwriters. Everybody's writing tunes today. It's not enough to write a song. It's not enough to sing a song, la-da-da-da-da, and I can tell you a funny story about that. You need more than that. You've got to go to school and learn. I said earlier, music is like a river. When you get in that river, you have a sense of destination. You know you're going down, you're going towards New Orleans, you're going to come to the Gulf of Mexico. Music is like that. Now, if in this river, classical music is one stream, possibly jazz is another, Gunther Schuller has a third stream, but I think the rock and rollers, for instance, are playing in little mud puddles on the bank, you know, and the songwriters of today on Broadway are kind of wading in the water, and I say if you want to be a composer, go to school, study, jump in the river and take a good swim.
And remember that. Now we have a perfect example of the wonderful wedding of the composer and the arranger with the mambo. Yes, go to work. Get a mambo up to the stand, Irvin. Wonderful. the gentlemen of the orchestra and Mr. Costill, because we continue with the Cool Fugue. Well, now we're leaving the music of Mr. Bernstein and going to discuss Mr. Sondheim as the composer, not just the lyricist. From now on, that's going to be the setup, is it not?
Well, there's always possibly an exception, but I intend from now on to write my own music because it's about 3 times as much fun as writing lyrics. But there may always come along something that's just so wildly exciting that I can't keep my hands off it.
Well, tell us about the new show.
Oh, well, the first show, the one that's almost completed now, I've been on it for about 3 years with my collaborators, is a show called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And it's, this is the year for long titles in musicals anyway. This is a show from an idea by a man named Bert Shevelov, who is one of the authors of the book. He's writing it, they're just finishing now, with Larry Gelbart. And it's based on the plays of Plautus, who is a 2,000-year-old situation comedy writer. Plautus wrote a large number of short plays each of which have been rewritten many, many times, not knowingly, right up through Desi and Lucy and Sergeant Bilko, whose prototype is to be found in the plays of Plautus. And we've taken about 9 of his plays and made an amalgam of them into one evening of musical theater in the Roman style, but with a group of comics instead of a group of so-called actors or performers of anything but a comic nature. The show's to star Milton Berle. It's being directed by George Abbott and produced by Hal Prince, who also produced West Side. And the evening is a sort of a celebration of comedy. There isn't a serious moment in the whole show. We hope maybe there'll be a couple of charming ones, but it's mostly comic from beginning to end. And the use of songs in it, I hope, will be different than the so-called integrated musical where the songs and the story constantly flow in and out of each other that have been going on for so many years now. I think a rather tired formula that...
well, it was a good thing when it happened. I remember all those years in operetta with those, you know, arbitrary song cues, you know, and bursting into song for no reason, although I know that's not what you're going to do with this.
Oh, we might. That's sort of
all
fun.
right, why not?
It's fun as long as
Let me
it's
ask
serious.
you something. What's going to happen when the lyricist gets terribly annoyed with the composer for not liking his lyrics, or vice versa, since you're both? What's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know of any time in the past when the lyricist has gotten annoyed with the composer. I do know many times when the composer's gotten annoyed with the lyricist, and sometimes the lyricist with the lyricist.
You don't anticipate any great trouble about this with yourself?
No, I sometimes run for help to Larry and Bert to say what's wrong, or what's right, which is more likely the case.
Do you have? I think you probably have answered the question. I know what you care to do. I think regarding music or lyrics. But do you have more confidence in the musical thing than the lyrics? Do you?
No, less confidence because I've got less experience behind me. That is, most of my musical background is training and 1 or 2 shows that I wrote for either practice or, in the case of Saturday Night, for no eventual production. But I've had experience in lyric writing,
Yes.
and also words are much easier to deal with in terms of specific criticism.
I know some of the words that you wrote in Gypsy said something about, in essence, you either have it or you don't.
You either got it or you ain't.
There you go. Stephen Sondheim certainly has it. He's a creative experimenter, and he is sure to be exploring, I know, for a long time, the very exciting frontiers of the American musical theater. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Maestro.
The American Musical Theater is produced by WCBS-TV in cooperation with the Board of Education of the City of New York. Today's program featured Irwin Kostal and the CBS Orchestra. With guest Stephen Sondheim and singers Martha Wright and Ralph Curtis. And the host for the workshop, Earl Wrightson. The students participating on today's program are from the high schools of the City of New York. West Side Story music, courtesy of United Artists, Harold Prince, G. Shermer Incorporated, Irwin Kostal, and Sid Raymond. This has been a presentation of the WCBS-TV Public Affairs Department.